The sledgehammer felt heavy in my hands. The afternoon sun was beating down on my driveway in Asheville, North Carolina. I wiped the sweat from my forehead with the back of my work glove. I took a deep breath. I raised the 10-pound hammer over my shoulder and swung it down with everything I had. The heavy iron struck the old cast iron and porcelain clawfoot tub. It hit with a deafening crack that echoed down the quiet suburban street. The side of the tub split wide open. A cloud of ancient white dust billowed up into the humid summer air. Then came a sound I did not expect. It was a dull, heavy thud. Something slid out from the hollow space hidden beneath the curved lip of the tub. It hit the concrete driveway and just sat there. It was a thick, black, waterproof bag. It was sealed tight. It looked like the kind of dry bag you would take on a kayaking trip. My heart skipped a beat. I leaned on the handle of my sledgehammer. I just stared at it. That tub had been sitting in our master bathroom for over 2 decades. I knew every inch of this house. I built half of it with my own hands. But I had never seen that bag before in my life. Welcome back to Dad's Silent Revenge Story. If you are new here, my name is Arthur. Grab a cup of coffee, settle into a comfortable chair, take a deep breath, and listen closely to what I am about to tell you today. Because betrayal does not always announce itself with a loud argument or a smoking gun. Sometimes it is perfectly silent. Sometimes it just falls right out of the things you thought you knew best. I am 64 years old. I am a retired general contractor. I have spent my entire life fixing things, tearing down broken structures and building them back up stronger. But nothing could have prepared me for what was waiting inside that black bag. I dropped the sledgehammer. The metal handle clattered against the concrete. My knees popped as I crouched down to get a closer look. The bag was covered in a thin layer of white porcelain dust. I reached out and brushed the dust away. The material felt thick and expensive. I unrolled the top seal and opened it. The first thing I saw was the cash. Thick stacks of $100 bills. They were bound together with heavy rubber bands. There had to be at least $20,000 sitting right there in the dirt. My stomach tightened. Underneath the money was a cheap, dark gray prepaid cell phone. And underneath the phone was a thick stack of printed papers, bound together with a black binder clip. I reached in and pulled the papers out. The bright sunlight glared off the crisp white pages. The very first page was a printed spreadsheet. It had dates, dollar amounts, and strange acronyms. But it was the bold text at the top of the page that made the blood freeze in my veins. It was a checklist. And step number 4 simply read, "Finalize the house transfer before Arthur catches on." I dropped the papers on the driveway. The hot summer breeze rustled the edges of the pages. I could not breathe. I looked around my quiet neighborhood. The manicured lawns, the tall oak trees, the peaceful life I had worked 40 years to build. It was all a lie. My wife of 22 years was planning to destroy me, and she almost got away with it. To understand how a man finds a bag of hidden cash and a betrayal checklist inside a bathtub, I have to take you back to the beginning of that week. Evelyn and I had a quiet, comfortable life, or so I thought. We had been married for 22 years. She was a beautiful woman, sharp, elegant, and always put together. We spent our mornings drinking black coffee on our back porch, watching the fog roll through the Blue Ridge Mountains. We did not have children of our own, but we had a nice nest egg and a paid-off house. I worked hard my whole life in construction so she would never have to worry. I provided. That was my job. That was how I showed my love. But lately, things had felt heavy between us. Evelyn had been complaining for months about feeling drained. She said the house was making her feel old. She said the walls were closing in on her. She complained about the kitchen cabinets. She complained about the landscaping. But most of all, she complained about our master bathroom. She hated that old clawfoot tub. She said it was an eyesore. She said it was impossible to keep clean. She said it made her feel like she was living in a haunted house instead of a luxury home. Every time I walked past the bathroom, I would see her staring at it with this look of absolute disgust. I wanted to fix it for her. I am a fixer. That is what I do. So, when Evelyn announced she was flying to Sedona, Arizona for a 5-day women wellness retreat, I saw my opportunity. She told me she needed space to clear her head. She said she needed to meditate and find her center again. I kissed her forehead at the airport drop-off, told her I loved her, and watched her walk through the security gate. The moment her plane took off, my plan went into motion. I drove my truck straight to the hardware supply store on the edge of town. I bought a beautiful, modern, freestanding soaking tub. I bought new Italian floor tiles. I bought fresh paint and modern fixtures. I dropped $3,000 without blinking an eye. I wanted to give her the bathroom of her dreams. I wanted her to come home, open that door, and realize how much I loved her. I started the demolition on a Tuesday morning. I shut off the main water valve. I disconnected the ancient plumbing. I taped off the bedroom to keep the dust contained. I worked until my shoulders ached and my lower back screamed in pain. But I kept smiling. I kept imagining the look on her face when she saw the finished product. By Wednesday afternoon, I finally wrestled that massive, heavy cast iron tub out of the bathroom. I dragged it inch by inch down the hallway, through the living room, and out the front door. I left it on the driveway, planning to smash it into smaller pieces so I could haul it away to the county dump. I had no idea I was hauling out the very thing that held her darkest secrets. I stood in the driveway with the printed papers in my hand. The sweat on my neck had gone completely cold. I read the checklist again. Finalize the house transfer before Arthur catches on. My hands started to shake. I am a calm man. I do not lose my temper. I do not yell. But in that moment, standing alone in my driveway, I felt a deep, dark rage waking up inside my chest. Evelyn was not in Sedona meditating. She was orchestrating my financial execution. And I was going to find out exactly who was helping her do it. I carried the heavy black bag out of the bright afternoon sun and stepped into the cool shade of my garage. The air inside smelled like pine sawdust and old motor oil. It was my sanctuary, a place where things made sense. A place where hard work always produced a clear result. But nothing made sense right now. I set the bag down on my heavy wooden workbench. My hands were trembling. I am a man who has poured concrete and framed houses for 40 years. My hands do not tremble. But they did today. I rolled the top of the waterproof bag open again. I reached inside and pulled everything out. I laid the items out on the workbench one by one. First was the money. The stacks of $100 bills were thick and heavy. The rubber bands holding them together were old and dry. One of them snapped against my thumb when I tried to pull it off. I did not bother counting every single bill. I knew what $20,000 or $30,000 looked like in a pile. It looked exactly like an escape fund. Next was the phone. It was a cheap plastic device, dark gray and completely unmarked. The screen was black and dead. I set it gently next to the cash. Then came the paper. It was a thick stack of standard printer paper held together with a heavy metal clip. I pulled the clip off. The pages fanned out across the rough wood of my workbench. I stared at them for a long time. I felt a cold sweat breaking out on the back of my neck. My chest felt incredibly tight. It felt like someone had wrapped a heavy iron chain around my ribs and pulled it tight. I dragged a large plastic bucket over to the workbench and sat down. My legs simply refused to hold my weight any longer. I stared at the things on my bench. Money, a secret phone, a printed list. These were not the possessions of a loving wife. These were the tools of a stranger. A stranger who had been sleeping in my bed and drinking coffee at my table for 22 years. The initial shock slowly started to wear off. It was replaced by a deep and heavy silence. I realized I was entirely alone in this house. My wife was supposedly in Arizona, meditating at a wellness retreat. But the truth was sitting right here on my workbench. I picked up the first page of the printed stack. The heading at the top was bold and clear. It said Phase 1. I swallowed hard. My throat felt like sandpaper. I took a slow breath and I started to read. The pages in my hand were not just scattered notes. They were a detailed blueprint. I read down the list. The first few items were already crossed out with a red pen. Open separate checking account at a new bank. Crossed out. Divert small amounts from joint savings over 12 months. Crossed out. Establish contact with Marcus regarding wealth transfer. Crossed out. My heart pounded heavily against my ribs. Marcus. The name jumped off the page and hit me right in the face. Marcus was our wealth manager. He was the man we trusted with our entire retirement portfolio. We had him over for dinner twice a year. He drank my expensive wine. He shook my hand on my front porch. And he was actively helping my wife steal everything I had built. I kept reading. The list moved into Phase 2. This part was not crossed out yet. This part was happening right now. Get Arthur to sign the new tax documents. The words hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. I closed my eyes. I let my head drop forward. The memory rushed back to me with sickening clarity. It happened exactly 3 weeks ago. We were standing in the kitchen. The morning light was shining through the windows. Evelyn was wearing her elegant silk robe. She had poured me a fresh cup of coffee just the way I like it. She slid a thick folder across the granite island. She smiled at me. That soft and loving smile I trusted completely. She told me Marcus needed updated signatures for our annual tax filings. She said it was just standard administrative paperwork. I was exhausted from working in the yard all day. I did not put my reading glasses on. I did not read the fine print. I just took the pen from her hand and signed exactly where she pointed. I smiled back at her and signed my own name away. I opened my eyes and looked down at the paper on my workbench. The next line on her list made the room spin. Leverage the signature of Arthur to open a home equity line of credit. Transfer maximum equity into the new secure account. Finalize the house transfer before Arthur catches on. She was bleeding the house dry. The home I built from the ground up. The home I paid off 10 years ago. She was turning it into massive debt and taking the cash out for herself. The betrayal was so deep it felt incredibly hard to breathe. This was not a sudden mistake or a temporary lapse in judgment. This was a long and quiet war. And Evelyn had been fighting it for months, while I thought we were perfectly at peace. The final line at the very bottom of the page was the coldest of all. Serve papers once the funds are cleared and untouchable. She was going to leave me with absolutely nothing. No money in the bank. No house to live in. Just a mountain of debt and a broken life. I carefully stacked the papers back together. I put the heavy metal clip back on. The sadness was entirely gone now. The confusion was gone. I looked at the cheap gray phone sitting next to the cash. Evelyn thought I was just a tired old man who would never look closely at the paperwork. She thought I was blind. But my eyes were wide open now, and it was time to go to work. I sat in the quiet of my garage for a long time. I just stared at the cheap gray phone resting on my workbench. The printed checklist had told me what my wife was planning, but I knew the phone would tell me exactly how she felt about it. I picked up the plastic device. It felt light and cheap in my hand. I pressed the power button and held it down. The screen flickered to life with a bright white glare. It was a basic prepaid model. There was no password lock. There was no fingerprint scan. Evelyn never expected anyone to find this bag. She felt completely safe, leaving it totally unsecured. I navigated to the message inbox. There was only one contact saved in the entire phone. The contact name was simply the letter M. I opened the message thread. The text stretched back for nearly 6 months. I started scrolling to the very beginning. I wanted to see exactly when the woman I loved turned into a monster. The first few messages were short. They were mostly setting up times to talk safely. But as the months went on, the messages became detailed. They became clinical. They were discussing my life savings like it was a corporate merger. I read a message from M sent back in February. He asked if the old man was getting suspicious about the mail. I felt a hot flash of anger in my chest. The old man. That is what they called me. I read the reply from Evelyn. She wrote that I was completely clueless. She typed that I was too busy fixing the gutters to notice the new bank statements. She said I trusted her with everything. I kept scrolling down. The messages from the past 3 weeks were the hardest to read. M sent a text asking if the tax forms were signed yet. Evelyn replied just minutes later. She typed that the forms were signed and secured. She boasted that I did not even put on my reading glasses. She wrote that I just smiled and signed wherever she pointed her finger. I had to put the phone down for a second. My vision was blurring. It was a strange feeling. I was not crying. I was just processing a level of betrayal that I did not know existed in the real world. She was mocking my trust. She was laughing at my love for her. I picked the phone back up and read the most recent messages. They were sent just 2 days ago, right before she left for her wellness retreat in Sedona. M texted her to make sure she kept me calm until Monday. He said the final equity transfer would clear by Monday afternoon. He warned her not to start any arguments. He told her to play the part of the loving wife for just a few more days. Evelyn sent a reply that made my blood run completely cold. She wrote that she was playing the part perfectly. She said she could not wait to see the look on my face when the locks were changed. She ended the message by saying she would celebrate with him in Sedona. She was never at a wellness retreat. She was in Arizona with Marcus. I turned the phone screen off. The garage was perfectly silent again. The truth was fully exposed now. This was not a mistake. This was a calculated and cruel robbery. And they thought I was just a naive old man who would lay down and let them take everything. They were wrong. I knew I could not handle this alone. If I confronted Evelyn right now, she would deny it. She would call Marcus. They would accelerate the timeline and freeze me out of my own accounts. I needed to be smart. I needed to be absolutely cold. I pulled my personal cell phone out of my pocket. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I needed. Vance. Vance was an old hunting buddy of mine. We had known each other for 30 years. He was a retired state trooper. He spent 2 decades investigating major frauds and domestic crimes. Vance was a quiet man. He was a smart man. He knew how the dark side of the world operated. I tapped his name and held the phone to my ear. He picked up on the 3rd ring. His voice was deep and gravelly. He asked how the bathroom remodel was going. I told him the remodel was canceled. I took a deep breath. I told him I needed his help and that it was an emergency. Vance did not ask a single unnecessary question. His tone shifted immediately from friendly to professional. He told me to start from the beginning. I stood there in my dusty garage and told him everything. I told him about the sledgehammer and the cracked porcelain. I told him about the black waterproof bag. I listed the cash, the burner phone, and the printed checklist. I told him about the messages with Marcus. Vance was completely silent on the other end of the line. He listened to every single word without interrupting me. When I finished my story, the silence stretched on for 10 seconds. Finally, Vance let out a slow exhale. He told me I was looking at a classic asset extraction scheme. He said he had seen it a dozen times in his career. A younger wealth manager targets an older client. They use the spouse to bypass all the legal safeguards. He said Marcus was a predator, and Evelyn was his inside agent. I asked Vance what I needed to do. I told him I wanted to tear the house apart and scream. Vance warned me in a very stern voice. He said I must not change my behavior, not even 1%. He told me that if Evelyn suspected I knew anything, the money would vanish overseas before the sun came up. He said I needed to play the part of the clueless old man for just a few more days. Then Vance gave me the most important piece of advice of my life. He said I needed a lawyer, but not just any lawyer. He said I did not need a friendly family attorney. I needed a shark. He gave me a name, Elena. Vance explained that Elena was a ruthless estate lawyer in downtown Asheville. She specialized in financial fraud and elder abuse cases. He said she was cold, calculating, and absolutely lethal in a courtroom. He promised to make a personal call to her right now and get me an emergency meeting. I thanked Vance from the bottom of my heart. He told me to stay strong and keep my head clear. We ended the call. I looked back down at the black bag on my workbench. The panic was entirely gone now. It was replaced by a sharp and focused energy. Evelyn and Marcus had a checklist to destroy my life. But starting tomorrow morning, Elena and I were going to write a new checklist. And they were not going to see us coming until it was much too late. I drove into downtown Asheville the next morning. The summer air was thick and heavy with mountain humidity. I parked my old truck outside a tall glass office building. Elena had her firm on the top floor. Her waiting room was completely silent and smelled like lemon polish. She did not keep me waiting long. Elena was a woman in her late 50s. She had sharp eyes and a very serious demeanor. Vance was absolutely right about her. She did not offer me a warm smile. She did not offer me a cup of coffee. She just shook my hand firmly, told me to sit down, and asked to see what I had found. I placed the printed checklist and the copies of the text messages on her large mahogany desk. I had kept the actual black bag, the cash, and the real burner phone locked safely inside the metal toolbox in the bed of my truck. Elena put on her reading glasses. The room was perfectly quiet as she read through the entire scheme Evelyn and Marcus had planned. I watched her face closely. She did not gasp. She did not look shocked. She just nodded her head slowly. When she finished reading, she took her glasses off and set them down on the desk. She looked at me with cold and calculating eyes. She told me Evelyn had made a fatal mistake. Evelyn put her entire criminal conspiracy in writing. Elena explained that Marcus was violating severe federal laws: fiduciary fraud, elder financial abuse, wire fraud across state lines. She said we were not going to stop them just yet. We were going to let them dig their graves a little deeper. We needed to let them attempt the final transfer at the bank. That action would lock in the federal felony charges permanently. Elena immediately started drafting a series of emergency legal injunctions. She prepared heavy legal documents to freeze all my personal assets the exact second Evelyn tried to execute the home equity line. She told me to take the original evidence to a highly secure location where Evelyn could never reach it. I left her office feeling a cold and powerful sense of control. I drove straight to a local credit union on the other side of town. I had kept a private safety deposit box there for years. Evelyn never knew it existed. I locked the heavy waterproof bag with the cash and the real burner phone inside the steel box. Then I drove to a big box electronics store. I paid cash for a cheap prepaid phone that looked exactly like the one Evelyn had hidden. I drove back to my house. I placed the dummy phone in a similar plastic bag and tucked it back under the shattered pieces of the bathtub in my garage. I made it look perfectly undisturbed. I spent the rest of the weekend cleaning up the master bathroom. I wanted everything to look completely normal. I swept up the white porcelain dust. I carried the heavy broken shards of the old clawfoot tub out to my truck. My back muscles ached with every load. But the physical pain was a welcome distraction from the deep betrayal burning in my chest. I set the new freestanding tub in the center of the bathroom. I left my tools scattered around the tile floor. It had to look like I was just a busy and dedicated husband working hard on a surprise project. I slept in the guest room those nights. I could not bring myself to sleep in the bed I had shared with Evelyn. The house felt incredibly empty, but it was a clean emptiness. The poison was out in the open now. The trap was set. All I had to do now was wait for the rat to come home. Evelyn returned from her trip on Sunday afternoon. I was sitting in a heavy wooden chair on the back porch when I heard her car pull into the driveway. My chest instantly tightened. I took a deep and slow breath. I remembered exactly what my old friend Vance had told me. Do not change your behavior. Not even 1%. I forced my jaw to unclench. I forced my shoulders to relax. I stood up and walked through the quiet kitchen to the front door. Evelyn was pulling her expensive leather suitcase up the front porch steps. She looked incredibly relaxed and healthy. Her skin was perfectly tanned. Her hair was styled. She had a bright and easy smile on her face. It was the exact kind of glowing smile a woman gets after spending 5 days in luxury with her secret lover. She dropped her heavy bag and walked right up to me. She wrapped her arms around my neck and kissed my cheek. She smelled like expensive perfume and dry desert air. She told me she missed me so much. She said the wellness retreat was exactly what she needed to clear her mind and find her peace. It took every single ounce of strength in my tired body not to push her away. Instead, I forced myself to smile back. I told her I was glad she had a good time. I told her she looked absolutely beautiful. Then she looked down and noticed the white dust on my work boots. She asked what I had been doing all weekend while she was gone. I played the part of the clueless husband perfectly. I rubbed the back of my neck and let out a tired sigh. I told her I was working on a big surprise in the master bathroom. I told her I finally took a sledgehammer and tore out that old clawfoot tub she hated so much. For a split second, her eyes went completely wide. Just a fraction of an inch. A tiny flash of pure panic crossed her face. She swallowed hard and asked me where the old tub was right now. I kept my voice completely steady and casual. I told her I hauled the heavy pieces to the county dump on Saturday morning. I said the bathroom floor was all cleaned up and ready for the new plumbing. Her shoulders instantly dropped. The panic vanished from her eyes just as fast as it appeared. She thought her secret bag was already buried under tons of garbage at the local landfill. She let out a small laugh and told me I worked too hard for her. She said I was the best husband in the world. Hearing those words come out of her mouth almost made me sick to my stomach. That night we sat together at the dining room table. I cooked her favorite meal: grilled, wild salmon, and roasted asparagus. We ate by the soft yellow light of the chandelier. She drank a large glass of expensive white wine. She sat there and told me long and detailed lies about meditation classes and hiking trails in Sedona. She was a spectacular liar. I just nodded and asked polite questions like a fool. Then she set her wine glass down on the table. She leaned forward slightly. She told me we had a quick appointment with Marcus the next morning. She said the bank needed me to verify my signature on those tax documents from last month. She promised it would only take 20 minutes of my time. I looked right into her lying eyes. I wiped my mouth with a cloth napkin. I told her that sounded perfectly fine. I said whatever we needed to do to secure our financial future, we should do it. She smiled warmly. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. The steel trap was ready to snap shut, and she was leading herself right into it. The drive into downtown Asheville that Monday morning was perfectly quiet. Evelyn sat in the passenger seat of my truck. She was sipping a fancy iced coffee and looking out the window at the morning traffic. She looked completely at peace. She looked like a woman who was just hours away from winning the lottery. I kept both hands on the steering wheel. I focused on the road ahead. I did not say a word. I just listened to the steady hum of the truck tires on the pavement. We pulled into the parking lot of the sleek glass building where Marcus had his wealth management firm. We walked through the double glass doors and took the elevator up to the third floor. The office smelled like expensive cologne and fresh leather. Marcus was waiting for us in his massive conference room. He wore a tailored navy blue suit. His hair was perfectly styled. He smiled broadly when we walked in. He walked around the large mahogany table and shook my hand firmly. He looked me right in the eye. He called me sir. He asked how my weekend was. I looked back at him. I gave him a slow nod. I told him my weekend was incredibly productive. We all sat down at the heavy wooden table. Evelyn sat right next to me. She crossed her legs and placed her expensive purse on the empty chair beside her. Marcus sat across from us. He folded his hands and leaned forward. He had a thick manila folder resting on the table right in front of him. He started his pitch. It was smooth. It was practiced. It was full of complicated financial words designed to confuse a working man. He talked about leveraging our home equity to protect against market inflation. He talked about moving funds into a secure high-yield trust. He pointed to the thick folder and said all he needed was my final signature to secure our golden years. He said the notary was waiting just outside the door. Evelyn placed her hand softly over mine. She looked at me with those big, innocent eyes. She told me this was the best thing for our future. She told me to just sign the papers so we could go get some lunch. I looked at her hand resting on mine. Then I looked across the table at Marcus. I reached forward and slid the heavy manila folder toward my side of the table. I did not open it. I just placed my large, calloused hand completely flat on top of it. I took a very slow breath. The fake smile dropped from my face. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I pulled out a folded stack of papers. I placed them right in the center of the mahogany table. I smoothed them out perfectly flat. It was the checklist. The printed ledger from the black waterproof bag. The conference room became instantly silent. The air in the room suddenly felt incredibly cold. I watched Evelyn look down at the papers. Her eyes locked onto the bold heading. Phase 1. Her face drained of all color in a fraction of a second. She stopped breathing. She looked like she had just seen a ghost. Marcus frowned. He leaned forward and looked at the checklist. He did not understand what it was yet. He started to ask me what kind of documents I had brought to the meeting. I did not let him finish his sentence. I reached into my other pocket. I pulled out the printed copies of the text messages. I dropped them directly in front of Marcus. I told him I brought his digital confession. I told him I read every single message. I told him I knew about the fake wellness retreat in Sedona. I told him I knew exactly what they thought of me. The clueless old man. The fool who never reads the fine print. Marcus froze. His mouth fell slightly open. The arrogant confidence vanished from his face completely. He looked at Evelyn in pure panic. Evelyn slowly pulled her hand away from mine. She started shaking. She stammered and tried to say my name. She tried to tell me there was a terrible misunderstanding. I raised my hand and told her to stop talking. I told her the performance was officially over. Right on cue, the heavy glass door of the conference room swung open. Elena walked in. She wore a dark gray tailored suit. She carried a heavy leather briefcase. Her face was like carved stone. She did not knock. She did not introduce herself politely. She just walked straight up to the table and stood right next to me. She looked down at Marcus. She stated her name and said she was my legal counsel. Then she dropped a massive stack of legal files onto the table. It sounded like a gunshot. She looked at Marcus and listed the charges. Attempted fiduciary fraud. Conspiracy to commit elder financial abuse. Wire fraud. She told him all of our joint accounts were legally frozen as of 8 o'clock this morning. Marcus stood up so fast his chair tipped backward and hit the glass wall. His hands were shaking. He told Elena she had no right to burst into his office. Elena did not even blink. She told him the federal authorities were currently reviewing the identical evidence packets we delivered to their field office an hour ago. She advised him to call a very expensive criminal defense lawyer immediately. Evelyn started crying. Real tears this time. She begged me to listen to her. She said she was confused. She said Marcus manipulated her into doing it. I stood up from the table. I looked down at the woman I had loved for 22 years. There was absolutely nothing left in my heart for her. It was completely empty. I told her she could tell that story to the federal judge. I turned my back on them and walked out of the room. Elena followed right behind me. We left them standing there in the wreckage of their own arrogant plan. It has been 6 months since that morning in the bank. The house is very quiet now. But it is a good quiet. The air feels lighter. I wake up early every morning. I drink my black coffee on the back porch and watch the fog roll through the Blue Ridge Mountains. I am completely alone and I have never felt safer. Evelyn and Marcus never saw a dime of my money. Elena was absolutely ruthless. She crushed them in court. Marcus lost his wealth management license permanently. The federal prosecutors took over the case based on the interstate wire fraud from their trip to Sedona. He is currently waiting for his criminal trial. He is facing up to 10 years in federal prison. Evelyn tried to fight me for the house during the divorce. But Elena presented the checklist and the text messages to the family court judge. The judge was completely disgusted. Evelyn walked away with absolutely nothing. Her beautiful life was gone. She currently lives in a tiny rented apartment 2 towns over. She works as a receptionist at a dental clinic just to pay her basic bills. I finally finished the master bathroom remodel. The new freestanding tub looks beautiful against the Italian floor tiles. Sometimes I just stand in the doorway and look at it. I think about how a simple act of love ended up saving my entire life. If I had never picked up that sledgehammer to surprise my wife, I would be homeless right now. I am telling you this story today because I need you to understand something very important. Trust is a beautiful thing in a marriage. But blind trust is incredibly dangerous, especially as we get older. The people who want to steal from you will not break through your window in the middle of the night. They will sit at your dining room table. They will pour your coffee. They will smile at you and tell you to just sign on the dotted line. You must protect yourself. Do not ever sign a financial document without putting your reading glasses on. Do not ever sign anything without reading every single word. Check your bank statements every month. Pull your credit report twice a year. If your partner suddenly starts acting secretive about the mail or the taxes, you need to pay very close attention. You are not being paranoid. You are being responsible for your own survival. If you suspect something is wrong in your house right now, do not confront them in anger. Do what I did. Get quiet. Get proof. Call a professional lawyer who specializes in financial abuse. Protect your assets before you ever say a word. I want to hear from you now. Please go down to the comments section and tell me what you think. Comment number 1 if you think I handled the confrontation at the bank perfectly. Comment number 2 if you think I should have smashed the bag with the sledgehammer and confronted her in the driveway. Comment number 3 if you have ever discovered a terrible financial secret in your own family. And right below your number, please tell me where you are watching from today. Tell me your city and your state. Tell me what time it is where you are. I read every single comment. I love knowing that my stories are reaching good people all over the world. If my story helped you or opened your eyes today, please hit the like button. It helps the channel grow, and it pushes this video out to other older folks who really need to hear this warning before it is too late. Please subscribe to Dad's Silent Revenge Story and turn on the notification bell. I share real stories of betrayal and justice every single week. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Stay sharp. Stay strong. Always read the fine print. And I will see you in the next story.